Hey, what is going on, everybody? So in today's video, we are going to be covering soldering, and there's a lot of information out there about soldering, and some of it's wrong and some of it's just missing stuff. So in today's video, I'm going to try to cover what soldering is all about, and I'm going to do a series on soldering. And so this first episode is going to be on splicing. And what is splicing? Well, splicing is pretty much when you just take two wires and you join them together. So that could be like in a wiring harness if you need to cut two wires. Let's say you have a wire like this and you need to cut it and then add a different wire in there and kind of connect it, or you need to add another wire like this and connect it. So that's splicing. So I'm gonna first talk about stripping wires and what I like to use for stripping wires. And so one of the things that I will use is the strip masters. And the strip masters are probably your best wire stripper. You'll see a lot of people recommend some, wire strippers like these. And these are great. These are great. Don't get me wrong. But I think for stranded wire, they just kind of don't really do a good job. So, and what I mean by that is they can nick wires. Now, so the soldering techniques that I'm going to teach you are the same techniques that NASA recommends to all of their students when it comes to soldering. So this is NASA level approved soldering. And I'm going to show everybody out there, I'm going to show you all how to do that. So first you want to get your strip masters. Now, these are not mil-spec strip masters or wire strippers. These are just going to be like your regular die cut, I guess. And you can see what I mean by that is there's a blade. See that blade right there? Let's see if I turn it. See, there you go. So it's really super sharp. And what that means is that if you take your wire and you put it in there like that, and then you cut it and you clamp down on it, it's going to cut the jacket. It's going to cut the jacket. See if we can kind of, yep. So you can see right there, it kind of cuts the jacket. From there, it'll bite, and then it will open it up like that. So that's what it does. Now, according to NASA standards, you cannot nick a wire. So sometimes with the regular ideal strip masters, you can nick a wire. Yeah, right there. See it? See those nicks right there in this wire? So you see that cut wire right there? See that? See that cut wire right there? So that wire would be this. So this whole strip would be rejected by NASA. So you cannot have any kind of cuts or nicks on the actual wire strand. Nicking, so meaning like a big kind of gouge has been taken out of the wire, then that will be rejected. So one trick, I'll cut this right here. So one trick you can do if you do have the blue ideal strip masters, if you can take the wire gauge, so this is 18 gauge, and you can sit it in the 18 gauge slot, and then you can just barely clamp down. You just want to barely do it. Then what you'll do is you'll go up to 16 gauge. 16 is going to be a little bit bigger, and then you can pull, and you actually won't nick or cut any wires because the next size up has just enough space so that it pulls the jacket off, but not nicking or cutting wires. And so that's a trick if you're going to use the blue strip masters. Now, you can also get the strip masters mil spec versions, and that's what these are right here. And so these are going to be your custom strip masters. And so the difference with these, you can see right here, is that the teeth on them, they're not sharp. They're almost like just some jaws, some like blunted jaws that grab the insulation, the wire insulation, and just pulls it apart, separates it. So you can see here, if we go into the 18 gauge right there and then just separate it, you see how it kind of, you can see like the wire jacket, how it just looks a little, see how it's kind of tugged, right? See how it's more tugged. It's not a clean cut like this side. That's going to be a clean cut. So another thing with NASA is that the wire insulation cannot have any kind of damage to it, otherwise it'll get rejected. But this is fine, and this side's fine. So that's something to know when you are soldering and preparing wires. Okay, so now that we have that out the way, the next thing you're going to want to use when soldering is you're going to want to clean it with some solvent. So there's the two easiest to get and solvents that are approved by NASA are denatured alcohol and isopropyl alcohol, denatured ethyl alcohol. I will say try to get a very pure form of denatured alcohol, and isopropyl, I would recommend 99%, 91%. Any of those two are going to be good. So next you want to take a brush and you want to just go ahead and clean your wire like that. Get rid of all oils and everything like that, because solder does not like to stick to oils or dirt or debris or anything like that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to prep our next wire. So we're just going to take our wire strippers right here and cut, break, twist just a little bit. I will say that sometimes if you want, I'll show you on this end, and it's better to demonstrate with these strip masters versus the other ones. You can take your wire stripper and then you can just break it. You're not taking the jacket all the way off, but you're just kind of breaking it, and then you're going to come back, open it up. There, you still have your wire jacket on, and you can just twist like that as you remove it. And this is just a demonstration, but this gives you an example of how one of the wires got cut, I believe, or pulled, got cut or pulled, but this would have to be rejected anyway. So, but I just wanted to show you, like, you can just take the jacket, twist a little bit, and then remove it. So that's just one way you can do that. All right, so going back to our wire prep. All right, so now that we have stripped our wires, can get all this out the way. All right, so now we can twist, and it's okay to twist by hand. That is okay according to NASA standards. So we're just going to go ahead and clean the wire, and we're going to now tin these wires. So we want to use some flux. Okay, so here you can see I just have some rosin paste flux. This is really good flux. There's a RMA and there's a rosin, and so just the RMA just stands for rosin mildly activated, and it just helps the flux just perform a better cleaning action. So you can see here what flux actually does is it cleans this. You can see right here this little kind of white spot, the kind of cleaner spot. Flux will remove all that oxidation so that the solder can wet into the material. All right, so one thing that flux is needed for is that wetting to help aid in the wetting. So you'll just flux the wire like this. And one thing with fluxing is that you don't want the flux to go all the way up to the wire insulation. So you just want to kind of keep it down below so that it doesn't wick its way up into the insulation. Okay, so we can sit that right here. Now, I will say it is good to have some helping hands. If you don't have helping hands, then you would just sit it right there. But if you do, then you can just go ahead and put your wire in the helping hands, just like that. Okay, so now let's talk about soldering. Okay, so now we're going to solder, and there's usually two types of solders. You have your 60-40, and then you have your 63-37. And so the first number is going to represent the amount of tin in the solder, and then the second number is going to represent the amount of lead. All right, so the 63-37 is a good solder. It's called eutectic solder because it has a low melting point and it dries or solidifies almost instantly. Whereas the 60-40, it has a little bit higher melting point and it takes just a little longer to solidify. There's a plastic period in between. So, all right, so now that we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of prep our tip. And so one of the ways to prep our tips is you can take a napkin or a Kim wipe and you're going to just kind of wipe off all of the oxidation on your soldering iron. And then you can use a metal mesh or a damp sponge, not a wet sponge, but a damp sponge. And then from there you can tin your tip. Just like that. Try not to breathe in these vapors. You don't want to do that. So after that, then we'll just come to our wire here and we'll tin the tip just a little bit because thermal bridging is a technique used where you add solder to the actual wire so that it just creates more of a better heat transfer. Okay, so you can see here my solder is starting to oxidize, so I'm just going to clean it once again and re-tin it, and then take it and then come up and all right. So the whole process should take about 2 seconds. And if it takes longer than 2 seconds, then you either need a bigger tip, either your tip's too small or your iron's not hot enough. So you want to kind of experiment with that, and that just takes practice. Also, there's something called workpiece indicator, and what that means is that in the case of soldering, your workpiece indicator is going to be your heat range and how much heat is the time that it takes to solder. So you're looking for heat and time. And if it's taking too long, then you know you're not using enough heat. And if it's taking too fast, then you know you're using too much heat. Okay, so all right, so now that we've tinned our wire and we've cleaned off all the flux, the next thing we're gonna do is do the other wire. All right, so now that we've done that, and then there's going to be 2 types of splices, or actually 3 types, and I'm going to show you. So the first one is called the lap splice. All right, so let's go ahead and get our solder. One thing about your solder wire, you never want to just melt it off when you cut it. You always want to cut it with some fresh snips, and then you want to clean your wire as well. So you want to make sure you clean your wires. It's NASA standard. Another thing is when you're soldering, you always want to keep your iron on the bottom of your work and solder from the top. So from the top down. Let's go ahead and solder here. Okay, so we're going to tin it. We've already fluxed it. All right, just like that. Okay. You can also use a brush to clean as well. So it's just something to take note of. Okay, so now that we have these two pieces together, the lap splice is pretty much when you just take two pieces of wire and you lay them on top of each other and then you solder them. Okay, so now that we have that, we'll go ahead and just add a little bit of flux, right? Once again, make sure that these are touching. And then we'll just take our solder, make sure our solder is cleaned, make sure our iron is clean. Okay, and then we'll just tin our iron, right? Okay, so now we're going to come in, make sure these are touching. There you go, just like that. So eutectic solder is really good for situations like this where your part is moving and you can't keep it still, because eutectic solder solidifies so fast. This is like a perfect example of when you would use eutectic, and eutectic is 6337. All right, so we'll just clean it like this. All right, so you can see there, that's our lap splice right there. And you can see it's super durable. Now, a lot of you might be thinking this isn't a reliable solder joint because basically I've just soldered two wires together and I didn't twist them or anything like that. And you have to understand that soldering is very similar to welding. It's not gluing. And a lot of times people might think that it's more in line with gluing, but it's not. When solder wets with copper, a chemical bond takes place and the properties change and they become new properties altogether, and it's its own bonded material. So it's very similar to welding. So this is not going to come apart. Now, after that, you'll just take your wire insulation, which we're going to save for last. I'm going to save that for last because we got so much to cover. But basically, you would just put a jacket over it, like a heat shrink, and then you would shrink it down. So I'm going to explain more about heat shrink on our last splice, but this is your lap splice. Okay, so we're going to set that aside, and now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a new splice. Okay, so I prepped some new wires here, and this is going to be for our new splice, and it's going to be our lash splice. So once again, now here what we're going to do is we're just going to pull that jacket off just like that and sit it in here, and then just to go over again, just yep, right here. So we're just gonna flux it, add solder to our tip to create a nice solder bridge, and then just apply heat. And there we go. Do the same to this one. Remove this. Throw this on there. Flux it. Clean your iron. Apply solder. And come from the top to bottom. All right, there we go. Remove it. Get your denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol. Clean off the flux, just like that. Clean off the flux on this one, just like that. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this back in our helping hands. Okay. And we're going to bring these two wires together just like this. Okay. Now, this is called a lash splice. And a lash splice is a little bit different than a lap splice, but it's very similar. If you don't really know what to look for, you might miss it. Okay, so we have these two wires here, and we have this thin copper strand. And where I got this copper strand from was actually just some leftover wire. So what a lash splice is, it's just like a lap splice, but you're going to take a copper strand and you're going to wrap it. Okay, so I got gloves on, so dexterity is a little tough right now, but you want to just wrap the two wires together, and according to NASA standards, this wire strand cannot overlap. So it has to be a continuously forward moving wrap. And you can see right there. All right, just key in, it has to be tight. It can't be loose. All right, I know it's kind of hard to see here, but all right, so all right, there we go. And then you have to cut all pieces that are sticking out. So if you have any kind of wire that's sticking out, you got to cut it. Let's say like that. Also, I believe you can cut it after it's been soldered, but you just can't have any sharp edges. Okay, so see if I can get that. See if I can show that on camera. There we go. All right, so you can see there that I've wrapped a copper wire around the two tinned wires. Okay, so there's a copper wire and it's holding them together. Now remember, this is not glue. This is soldering is more like welding. So once all of this comes together with solder, it's going to form a really strong connection. Really strong. Okay, so now that we've got it all soldered, all fluxed, we're going to grab our solder and clean our iron, tin our tip, get a nice solder bridge going there. Right, so we're just going to add some solder here. Then we're going to come up from the bottom, remember, and add solder from the top. And it should take no longer than 2 seconds. There we go. All right, so now we can remove that. And you can see right there that we have a nice soldered connection. So from there, what we do is we'll get our solvent. So in this case, some denatured alcohol, and we'll go ahead and just clean it up. Now remember, You can also use a brush, and I highly recommend using brushes to get in there and clean off all of that flux, because you want to make sure you get rid of all the flux or as much flux as possible, depending on your application. All right, so it's all clean, and you can see right there, you can see right there that there's our solder connection. Now, once again, this is, I'm yanking on this thing and that thing's not going anywhere. Look how the wire bent because I'm yanking on it so hard, but that connection is solid. So this is a lash splice. All right, so this is totally acceptable, and this is approved by NASA. Okay, so now on to our next splice, and that's going to be our last splice of the day, and it's our Western Union. So let's get to it. All right, so now we have our last splice, and that's going to be our Western Union splice. Now, with the Western Union splice, and this is actually my favorite splice because one cool thing is that the Western Union splice creates a physical, mechanical connection that's really strong before you even start soldering. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your stripped wires. Now remember, we've already cleaned them. Okay, so we've already taken our solvent and everything, and we've cleaned our wires, and they're nice and clean. And for the Western Union, I don't tin, because if you're dealing with some pretty big gauge wires, then the tinning, it's hard to maneuver the wires or manipulate the wires. So I keep them, I don't tin them. Now you can see that these copper wires are shiny already, and these are pre-tinned copper wires. So you can buy a pre-tinned copper wire. This is actually marine wire. And all this stuff, I'll put a link down in the description below. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button, and please subscribe to the channel if you like all the content on this channel, and share this video with a friend if you know someone who's just starting out on an electrical project for their car or anything like that. Share this video. It really helps out the channel. Okay, so we're going to take our car. Okay, so we're going to take our wires, and we're going to kind of make an X like this, right? And we're just going to take one. Now, if you see your wires kind of separating, just go ahead and give them a pretty good twist like that. And yeah, just give them a pretty good twist. Yeah. All right, so let's get back to it. All right, so you're going to make an X like this, and then you're just going to cross over. And recommended is about 3 revolutions. Whoops. All right, so you can see there, cross over and cross over again, cross over again. So basically you're just twisting this wire around each other. You're just twisting them together. So you can see there, they're twisted. Okay, and you got 3 or 2 loops on each side, and you can see, actually I pulled the wire out of the jacket. That's how strong this connection is, even without soldering. So kind of got that. Let's see if I can put it back together. All right, no big deal, because this wire is just practice and demonstration wire only. Okay, so there's our Western Union or lineman splice. They're both the same, Western Union or lineman splice, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and throw this in our helping hands right here, and let's see. All right. Whoops. Okay, and once again, we're just going to go ahead and apply some flux. And I would say this is more important. Flux is more important here, just because we didn't tin before, so there's not already solder on there to kind of help us make a connection already. Okay, so this is going to be like a new solder joint. All right, so remember, we're going to tin our tip, clean our tip, then tin our tip, and we've cleaned our wire, we've fluxed our wire. So now what we're going to do is at the solder on the tip acts as a thermal bridge. We're going to take our solder from the top, and we're going to apply heat, and we're going to just... So you can see here, this joint is a little bit too big for the tip that we've been using before. So it's taking longer to heat up. And this is a good example of workpiece indicator. So our workpiece indicator is the time it takes for something to heat up. So you can see that it's taking too long. So we can either switch to a bigger tip or we can apply more heat. So in this case, I'm going to apply a little bit more heat. And I'm also going to cut a new piece of wire. I'm going to clean that wire. Okay, cleaning the wire. And all right, the iron is up to temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do one more thing. I'm going to come back and flux it once more, just in case some oxidation built up. And all right. Okay, so now we have our solder. It's right underneath us. Okay. And you can see the solder is flowing a lot better now. And if you want, just add a little bit more. Okay, clean our tip, and now we have a good connection. It is soldered. Now all we have to do is get our solvent of choice and clean it. So Kim wipes are recommended just because they have a low lint content, but I almost want to say you can get away with using single ply toilet paper or paper towel. It's your choice, but if you want, you can use Kim wipes. And once again, I'll have links for everything in the description below. So remember, that is a good example what I just showed you of workpiece indicator. And if you are going to be soldering larger joints, it's probably better to use a larger tip rather than to bump the heat up, in my opinion. But either way, workpiece indicator is going to be your best judgment. Okay, all right, so you can see right there that now we have our Western Union, and that is a strong and solid connection. Okay, so now I explained that I was going to use a insulator over here, so that's what I'm going to do. And this one's a little short, so I'm going to get a longer one. All right, so pretty much what you want to do is you want to have your insulation cover a little bit over where you're soldering, or the wire. It should cover the wire. All right, so you can see right there that it does. All right, so now what we're going to do is apply heat. So let's go get the heat gun and apply some heat. All right, so we have our heat shrink ready to go. And now we're just going to go ahead and slide it over like this. All right, and now that it's set like that, we'll take our heat gun, okay, and we'll just apply some heat. Now, I like to apply heat. I will say one thing about shrink wrap or heat shrink. buy the heat shrink that's at least a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning that it'll shrink down 3 times its size. Also, buy a heat shrink that has glue on the inside so that when it seals, the glue melts all around the wire and the joint, creating a watertight seal. Okay, so that's highly recommended. And once again, I'll leave links down in the description below. So we're just going to take our heat gun. All right, and another reason that I like to go from either left to right or right to left is because you prevent air bubbles from forming in your insulation. Okay, so now that our insulation has shrunk down to the wire size, we are good to go. So now we have a protected joint that's protected from the elements, and also if you have other electrical sensitive instruments, you don't have to worry about bare wire touching metal and shorting out or anything like that. Okay, all right, so that pretty much wraps everything up, and now you know how to solder according to NASA standards. So I hope that this video has helped y'all and you're ready to go out and start splicing and making some amazing wire connections, and now you are great solderers. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to crimp, and I'll explain some more about just soldering and everything like that. So with all that said, thank you again for tuning in. Thank you so much for allowing me into your homes. And if you like this video, please hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next video.